Punished by his drunken owner, a German shepherd endured days without food or water until a woman saw him. What happens when a life once filled with love turns into one of neglect and suffering? This is the story of a German shepherd who faced unimaginable cruelty, abandoned and starved by the very person who should have protected him. Just when all hope seemed lost, a single encounter changed everything. Who was the woman who saw him? And what did she do to rewrite his fate? Stay tuned to uncover this heartwarming journey. The sky was painted in hues of amber and violet as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban streets. Emily walked her usual evening route, the rhythmic crunch of her sneakers against the gravel providing a soothing cadence. Her day had been a blur of meetings and unanswered emails. But this daily ritual, this quiet walk through the neighborhood, was her sanctuary. She passed familiar houses, each with neatly trimmed lawns and porch lights flickering on. It was a picture of serene normalcy. Yet that night, something felt off. As Emily turned onto a side street, a faint sound pricked her ears. She paused mid-step, her heartbeat quickening. At first, it was barely audible, a weak whimper carried on the cool evening breeze. She scanned the rows of houses, her brows furrowing. The sound came again, clearer this time, a heartbreaking mix of desperation and exhaustion. Emily followed it, her steps cautious yet determined, until she reached the edge of a dilapidated yard. The sight before her stole her breath. There, tethered to a rusty chain too short to allow even the slightest movement, was a German shepherd. His coat, once a proud blend of sable and black, was now matted and caked with dirt. His ribs jutted out sharply, each breath a visible struggle. His ears, which had likely once stood tall and alert, drooped lifelessly. His sunken, dull eyes met hers with a mixture of fear and silent pleading. The yard was barren, save for an overturned water bowl and a cracked, empty food dish. Emily's heart clenched. She had seen stray animals before, but this was different. This was no accident or oversight. This was deliberate neglect. She turned her gaze to the small house behind the yard. The curtains were drawn, the windows dark. A sick feeling churned in her stomach as she pieced together the story the yard told. Someone lived here, yet they had left this poor creature to suffer. Stepping closer, Emily crouched low, trying to appear non-threatening. "Hey there, buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The dog flinched but didn't move, the chain pulling taut against the post. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out a granola bar she had grabbed on her way out. Tearing it open, she broke off a small piece and held it out. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dog sniffed the air tentatively, but didn't move closer. His body remained rigid, his trust clearly shattered by whoever had condemned him to this pitiful state. Emily set the piece of granola bar on the ground and backed away. Slowly, the dog inched forward, his movements tentative and pained. He sniffed the morsel, then devoured it in one quick motion. Emily's eyes welled up as she noticed how his jaws trembled, as if he hadn't eaten in days. Pulling out her phone, Emily dialed the local animal control hotline. The operator answered, their tone brisk but professional. "There's a dog in dire need of help," Emily began, her voice shaking. She described the scene, giving the address and emphasizing the urgency. The operator assured her that a team would be dispatched immediately. As she ended the call, Emily sank to her knees a few feet from the dog, maintaining enough distance to avoid alarming him further. She rummaged through her bag and found a small bottle of water. Pouring some into the cap, she slid it toward him. The dog hesitated, his wide, hollow eyes watching her every move. After a few agonizing seconds, he inched forward again, lapping up the water with desperate gulps. Emily's gaze drifted to the collar around his neck. It was old and weathered, its metal tag scratched and nearly illegible. She could make out the faint outline of a name. "Buddy!" Her chest tightened. This wasn't just a nameless stray. This was someone's dog, someone who had cared enough to name him once. What had gone wrong? What series of events had led to this once-loved creature being abandoned and left to rot in this yard? Minutes felt like hours as Emily waited for animal control to arrive. She remained crouched, speaking softly to the dog, even though he kept his distance. "You're not alone," she murmured, her voice a mix of comfort and quiet anger. "Help is coming, I promise." The dog's ears twitched slightly, the only indication that he heard her. Finally, the distant rumble of a truck broke the silence. Red and blue lights flashed as the animal control vehicle pulled up. Two officers stepped out, their faces a mix of professionalism and concern as they assessed the situation. Emily quickly explained what she had seen and what little she knew. The officers approached the dog with practiced care, one of them holding out a slip lead while the other kept their voice calm and steady. The dog growled faintly, a last-ditch effort to defend himself, but he was too weak to put up much of a fight. Within moments, they had secured him and gently removed the heavy chain from his neck. As they loaded the dog into the truck, Emily felt a pang of sorrow and relief. She reached out tentatively, her hand brushing against his matted fur. "You're safe now," she whispered. The dog looked at her, his eyes still guarded, but no longer entirely devoid of hope. The officers thanked Emily for her vigilance and assured her that the dog would receive immediate medical attention. As the truck pulled away, Emily stood in the fading light, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She didn't know what would happen to Buddy, or Rex, as she decided to call him, in honor of the strength she believed he had within him, but she knew she couldn't walk away. That night, as she returned home, Emily's thoughts were consumed by the dog she had left behind. She resolved to follow up with the shelter to ensure he was being cared for, and perhaps, just perhaps, to be a part of his journey toward healing. Little did she know, her encounter with Rex was the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. Rex lay on the cold steel floor of the kennel, his body motionless except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead blended with the muffled barks of other dogs, creating a constant, uneasy rhythm. The shelter was clean and orderly, but to Rex it was yet another strange and unfamiliar place. He barely registered the soft voices of the staff who hovered nearby, their words filled with gentle encouragement he could neither understand nor trust. Every fiber of his being ached, from the deep bruises under his fur to the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. Yet it was the emptiness in his heart that hurt the most. The shelter staff moved around him with practiced efficiency. A young woman with kind eyes knelt beside him, speaking softly as she reached out with a bowl of food. Rex flinched, his muscles tensing as if bracing for a blow. "It's okay, buddy," she murmured, setting the bowl down and backing away. The aroma of fresh food wafted toward him, and despite his fear, hunger won the battle. He inched forward, his movements slow and cautious, before finally burying his muzzle in the bowl. He ate as though every bite might be his last, barely chewing, his eyes darting around for signs of danger. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of medical examinations and quiet observations. The vet's gentle hands prodded his emaciated frame, the bright lights above the examination table making him squint. Needles pricked his skin as he received vaccines and treatments for infections. But Rex barely reacted. Pain was no stranger to him. It had been his constant companion for what felt like an eternity. What unsettled him more were the hands that touched him not to hurt, but to help. He couldn't reconcile the kindness with the memories of cruelty etched into his soul. Emily arrived at the shelter the day after Rex was rescued, her heart heavy with worry. She'd barely slept, her thoughts consumed by the image of his frail body and haunted eyes. When she stepped into the shelter's lobby, the familiar scent of disinfectant mixed with the faint odor of wet fur greeted her. A volunteer at the front desk smiled warmly. "You must be Emily," the woman said. "We've been expecting you. Rex is in our recovery wing. I'll take you to him." The walk down the long hallway felt like an eternity. Emily's heart pounded with anticipation, her mind racing with questions. Would he recognize her? Would he trust her? As they approached his kennel, she spotted him lying in the corner, his head resting on his paws. He looked smaller than she remembered, his body curled in on itself as if trying to disappear. The volunteer opened the door for her, and Emily stepped inside, her movements slow and deliberate. "Hi, Rex," she said softly, kneeling a few feet away. His ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but he didn't lift his head. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a small treat, placing it on the ground between them. She didn't expect him to come to her, not yet, but she wanted him to know she was there. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. For the next week, Emily came to the shelter every day. She sat by his kennel, speaking to him in a calm, soothing tone, even when he refused to move. Each visit was a test of patience and persistence. She brought books to read aloud, letting her voice fill the quiet space as Rex watched her warily from his corner. She left treats and toys, though he often ignored them. Still, she didn't give up. She knew trust wasn't something Rex could offer easily. It had to be earned. The shelter staff marveled at her dedication. "Most people wouldn't come back after seeing a dog in his condition," one of the volunteers said. "But you're here every day." Emily shrugged, her gaze fixed on Rex. "I can't explain it," she admitted. "There's just something about him. I feel like he needs me, and honestly, I think I need him too." One afternoon, after nearly a week of visits, something extraordinary happened. Emily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading from a worn paperback she'd brought from home. Her voice was steady, the words flowing in a gentle rhythm. She didn't notice at first, but Rex had shifted. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he had inched closer to her, his nose quivering as he sniffed the air. When Emily finally looked up, her breath caught in her throat. Rex was no longer in his corner. He was just a foot away, his dark eyes locked onto hers. She didn't move, afraid any sudden action might startle him. Instead, she smiled, her heart swelling with hope. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly. "You've got this." She reached out, her hand resting on the floor, palm up. For a moment, Rex hesitated. Then, with a cautious step, he closed the gap and sniffed her fingers. Emily felt the warm, damp touch of his nose against her skin, and tears welled up in her eyes. It was a small gesture, but to her it was monumental. From that day forward, Rex's progress was slow but steady. He began to eat with more enthusiasm, his body filling out as he gained weight. His coat, once dull and matted, started to regain its shine. He even ventured out of his kennel during short walks with the shelter staff, though he always kept close to the walls, his body language cautious and reserved. Emily continued her daily visits, her bond with Rex growing stronger with each passing moment. She learned about his past from the microchip information the shelter had retrieved. His original owner had passed away, leaving Rex to the care of a distant relative who had little interest in him. Over time, neglect turned to outright abandonment, and Rex's world became a small, barren yard. Hearing his story broke Emily's heart, but it also strengthened her resolve. She knew she couldn't change his past, but she could shape his future. She began to dream of what life might look like with Rex by her side. She imagined long walks in the park, lazy afternoons on the couch, and the simple joy of knowing he was safe and loved. As Rex continued to heal, the shelter staff noted his growing attachment to Emily. "You're his person," one of the volunteers told her. Emily smiled, the weight of those words settling over her. She didn't know if she was ready for the responsibility of adopting him, but she couldn't deny the connection they shared. One evening, as she prepared to leave, Rex did something that cemented her decision. As she stood by his kennel, saying her usual goodbye, he rose to his feet and pressed his nose against the bars, letting out a soft, almost imperceptible whine. It was the first time he'd reached out to her, the first time he'd shown her he didn't want her to go. Emily's throat tightened as she knelt to meet his gaze. "Don't worry, Rex," she whispered. "I'll be back tomorrow, and one day I'll take you home." Rex's transformation continued, slow but undeniable, like the thawing of ice after a long, relentless winter. His ribs, once starkly visible beneath his fur, began to disappear as his body regained strength. His coat, cleaned and brushed regularly by the shelter staff, now carried a faint sheen, hinting at the vitality hidden beneath the scars of neglect. Yet it was his eyes that held the most profound change. What had once been lifeless orbs of resignation now carried a flicker of curiosity, a faint ember of hope ignited by Emily's unwavering presence. Emily arrived at the shelter every morning, armed with treats, toys, and an endless reservoir of patience. Her voice had become a constant in Rex's life, a melody of warmth and reassurance that cut through the lingering shadows of his fear. She spoke to him as though he were an old friend, her words weaving tales of brighter days and peaceful moments. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Rex began to trust her. The first breakthrough had come with the simple act of taking a treat from her hand, a moment so small it might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. But to Emily, it was monumental. One morning she arrived to find Rex standing at the front of his kennel, his tail wagging in tentative, uneven strokes. The sight stopped her in her tracks. "Good morning, Rex," she said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of surprise and joy. He stepped closer, his nose brushing against the mesh of the kennel door. Emily crouched down, her heart swelling with pride. "You're getting braver every day, aren't you?" she whispered. She unlocked the kennel door and stepped inside, her movements slow and deliberate. Rex watched her carefully, his ears twitching, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he allowed her to approach, his body tense but not trembling. She knelt beside him, holding out a new toy she had brought, a soft plush bone that squeaked when squeezed. Rex tilted his head, his curiosity piqued. Emily gave the toy a gentle squeeze, and the high-pitched squeak seemed to intrigue him. After a moment of hesitation, he extended his neck and sniffed it. Encouraged, Emily placed it on the ground between them and waited. To her delight, Rex lowered his head and nudged the toy with his nose, the faintest hint of playfulness flickering in his eyes. That day marked a turning point. Rex began to show more signs of his true personality, hidden for so long beneath layers of fear and mistrust. He followed Emily to the play yard, his steps cautious but steady. Once outside, he stayed close to her, his gaze darting around as he took in the open space. Emily sat on the grass, giving him room to explore, but remaining close enough to offer reassurance. She tossed the plush toy a short distance, and to her astonishment, Rex took a few tentative steps toward it. Though he didn't pick it up, the act of approaching it felt like a victory. Over the next few weeks, Rex continued to blossom. He began to approach other members of the shelter staff, his fear of strangers gradually fading. He even allowed himself to be led on short walks outside the shelter, the leash no longer a symbol of confinement, but a bridge to new experiences. Emily was there for every milestone, her presence a steady anchor in the uncharted waters of Rex's recovery. One afternoon, as Emily and Rex sat together in the play yard, the shelter director approached her with a thoughtful expression. "You've done wonders for him," the director said, gesturing toward Rex, who lay contentedly at Emily's feet. "He's come so far in such a short time." Emily smiled, her hand resting gently on Rex's head. "He's the one doing the hard work," she replied. "I'm just here to cheer him on." The director hesitated, then continued. "We've been discussing his future, and it's clear that he thrives when you're around. Have you thought about adopting him?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with possibility. Emily looked down at Rex, who gazed back at her with eyes that now held trust and affection. She had considered the idea, of course. How could she not? But the weight of responsibility gave her pause. "I've thought about it," she admitted. "I just want to make sure it's the right decision, for both of us." The director nodded understandingly. "Take your time," she said, "but I think he's already made his choice." That evening, Emily couldn't shake the director's words. As she sat in her small apartment, her mind replayed every moment she had shared with Rex. She thought about the way he had looked at her, the way his tail wagged when she arrived, the way he had begun to trust her in a way he trusted no one else. Deep down, she knew the answer. The next morning, Emily arrived at the shelter with a sense of purpose. She found Rex waiting at the front of his kennel, his tail wagging in greeting. "Good morning, Rex," she said, her voice steady. "I have some big news for you." She knelt down and unlocked the kennel door, stepping inside to sit beside him. "How would you like to come home with me?" she asked softly. Rex tilted his head, his ears perking up as if he understood. The adoption process was straightforward, but to Emily, it felt momentous. As she signed the papers, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She knew that bringing Rex home would be a challenge, but she also knew it was the right thing to do. When the paperwork was complete, the shelter staff gathered to see them off. "Take good care of him," one of the volunteers said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's a special one." Rex walked beside Emily as they left the shelter, his steps steady and confident. The world outside was a whirlwind of sights and sounds, but he stayed close to her, his trust in her unwavering. When they reached her car, he hesitated for a moment before jumping in, his tail wagging as if to say, "I'm ready." As they drove to Emily's apartment, she glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery. "This is the start of something new," she said, her voice filled with hope. "For both of us." Rex turned his head, meeting her eyes for a brief moment, and she could have sworn she saw understanding in his gaze. When they arrived home, Rex stepped into the apartment with cautious curiosity. He sniffed every corner, his tail wagging faintly as he explored his new surroundings. Emily watched him with a smile, her heart swelling with gratitude. This wasn't just her home anymore, it was theirs. That night, as Rex curled up on a soft bed Emily had prepared for him, she sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his back. "You're safe now, Rex," she whispered. "This is your home." His eyes closed, his breathing steady, and for the first time, he looked truly at peace. Rex had settled into his new life with Emily, more seamlessly than she could have hoped. Weeks had passed since the day she brought him home, and the transformation in him was nothing short of remarkable. The once fearful, emaciated dog who cowered in corners now carried himself with quiet confidence. His coat, now glossy and full, shone in the sunlight during their morning walks, and his tail wagged more freely, a barometer of his growing joy. He followed Emily everywhere, his loyalty unwavering, as though he understood the magnitude of what she had done for him. Emily's small apartment quickly became their shared sanctuary. She had rearranged her space to accommodate him, swapping decorative rugs for more dog-friendly ones, and placing his bed in the living room, where he could lounge comfortably. The shelves, once cluttered with books and trinkets, now held jars of dog treats and an assortment of toys that Rex had claimed as his own. She didn't mind the changes. In fact, the presence of his things made the apartment feel more alive. It was no longer just a place she lived, it was home. Their daily routines became rituals that strengthened their bond. Mornings began with walks to the nearby park, where Rex reveled in the open spaces and the chance to chase after his favorite ball. Emily loved watching him run, his movements full of energy and grace, his ears flopping as he bounded across the grass. It was a stark contrast to the frail dog she had first met, and each time she saw him like this, her heart swelled with pride. Afternoons were quieter, spent curled up together on the couch. Emily would read aloud while Rex rested his head on her lap, his soft snores filling the room. Evenings brought more walks, this time under the soft glow of streetlights, the world calm and peaceful around them. But it wasn't just the day-to-day life that changed for Rex. It was his spirit. He began to trust not just Emily, but the world around him. Neighbors who had initially kept their distance were drawn in by his gentle demeanor. Children approached cautiously at first, but Rex's calm, friendly nature quickly put them at ease. He became something of a local favorite, his story spreading among the community. People admired his resilience and Emily's dedication, and their journey inspired others to consider adopting shelter animals themselves. One Saturday morning, Emily and Rex attended a community event at the park, a fundraiser for the local animal shelter. The event was bustling with activity, with booths set up to promote pet adoption, sell handmade goods, and provide information about animal care. Emily had been invited to share Rex's story, and though she felt nervous about speaking in front of a crowd, she knew it was important. As she stood on the small stage, microphone in hand, Rex sat calmly by her side, his leash loose in her grasp. She began by describing the day she found him, her voice trembling slightly as she recounted the heartbreaking scene in the barren yard. She spoke of his journey from fear and neglect to trust and happiness, pausing occasionally to compose herself when the emotions threatened to overwhelm her. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause, their admiration palpable. Rex, seemingly sensing the moment, stood and wagged his tail, drawing laughter and cheers. After her speech, people approached her to thank her for sharing their story. Some brought their own dogs to meet Rex, who greeted them with gentle sniffs and wagging tails. One boy, no older than 7, knelt in front of Rex and hugged him tightly, whispering, "You're a good boy." Emily watched with tears in her eyes, knowing how much this moment symbolized for both Rex and herself. As the event wound down, a woman approached Emily, her expression hesitant yet hopeful. She introduced herself as Laura and explained that she had been one of Rex's original owners. Her voice trembled as she recounted how Rex, then called Buddy, had been her husband's beloved companion. After her husband's sudden passing, Laura had struggled to cope and had made the heartbreaking decision to give Rex to a relative, believing it was the best option. She hadn't known about the neglect he endured until Emily's speech. Emily's heart ached for Laura, but she also felt protective of Rex. She glanced down at him, his calm demeanor a testament to how far he had come. "He's been through so much," Emily said gently, "but he's happy now. He's loved." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I can see that," she said, "and I'm so grateful to you for saving him. I just wanted to thank you in person and let you know how much he meant to my husband." The conversation ended on a bittersweet note, and as Laura walked away, Emily felt a deep sense of closure. Rex had found his place, and while his past was a part of him, it no longer defined him. The months that followed brought nothing but joy and growth. Rex became a certified therapy dog, visiting hospitals and schools with Emily. His gentle nature and calm presence brought comfort to patients and children alike. His journey a living testament to resilience and second chances. Emily, too, found herself transformed. Her bond with Rex had taught her patience, empathy, and the profound impact of unconditional love. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Emily looked at Rex and felt a surge of gratitude. "You saved me as much as I saved you," she whispered, running her fingers through his soft fur. Rex looked up at her, his eyes filled with trust and affection, and rested his head on her lap. Their story, one of healing and hope, became a reminder to everyone they met of the power of love to mend even the deepest wounds. For Emily and Rex, the journey wasn't just about survival. It was about finding joy, purpose, and a future worth living together. In the quiet moments of their shared life, surrounded by peace and contentment, they both knew they had found exactly what they had been searching for: home. This story reminds us of the incredible resilience of both animals and humans and the transformative power of compassion. Rex's journey from fear and neglect to trust and joy shows that second chances can heal even the deepest wounds. It teaches us that love, patience, and kindness are not just powerful, they're life-changing. Emily's dedication to Rex reveals how small, consistent acts of care can create profound, lasting impacts, not only for the ones we help, but also for ourselves. For every Rex out there, waiting in the shadows of neglect or abandonment, there's an opportunity for someone like Emily to make a difference. This story isn't just about one dog's redemption. It's about the bond we share with animals and the mutual healing we can offer each other when we choose to care. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. If this story moved you, inspired you, or even just made you smile, please like the video and share it with others. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate hope, resilience, and the extraordinary connections between humans and animals. Together, let's spread the message of love and second chances.